Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for this wonderful session that you're putting together, Reverend Beth. Reverend Beth is, of course, the founder of Eat for the Earth, and she's been an icon in our movement on whole food, plant-based eating and taking care of social justice issues and animal justice issues. You have been really instrumental in a lot of the changes that we have been seeing here. So thank you for putting together this panel on how to get funding for your project. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rao. That was very sweet. Give me a thumbs up if you are working toward a plant-powered human presence on Earth. Give me a thumbs up. All righty, I can see some of your thumbs, and give me 2 thumbs up if you're ready to hear about sources of support for our movement. Give me 2 thumbs up. Okay, I can see that you are in the right place. Thank you for joining us for this panel discussion, Get Funding for Your Project. Here at Eat for the Earth, we are doing a lot of work that's crucial and that really needs funding. And so I thought that it would be a value to others in this movement to also learn about some of the funders that are available, not by any means all. And before I introduce our panelists, I just want to let you know that I'd love people to be fully participatory and engaged in this discussion. So for starters, if you could please turn your camera on if you have one and if you're willing, so we can better connect with you. And as we go, please put your questions in the chat. At the end, we'll have a time for Q&A. And we also, our panelists may be, when they're not talking, may be responding to your questions in the chat as well. So raising funds is a very broad topic, and today we're going to focus on one type of funding, which is grant funds. And you'll hear from representatives of 2 or 3 organizations that provide grants for vegan and plant-based projects. And now is the first opportunity to get engaged. If you're currently engaging in activism of any kind related to veganism and or plant-based eating, please write "I'm active" in the chat. So let's see that chat coming alive with "I'm active." Okay, and if you would love to get funding for your work, please write "yes, please" in the chat. Right, yes, please. All righty. Okay, I can see that you are ready for this discussion, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panelists. I'm going to start with, actually, we'll come back to that one. Actually, I'll go ahead and introduce her now. Dawn Moncrief is expected. She's the founder and president of A Well-Fed World. And if she comes in, I will give her a more full introduction. Leslie Barcus is with us here, and you can bring her up, BJ. Leslie Barcus is the executive director at VegFund. She has extensive governance and leadership experience in nonprofit and private enterprises around the world. Leslie has a master's degree in international economic development. Her professional exposure spans more than 40 countries and includes work in animal rights, biodiversity conservation, behavior change, and very much more. She believes that innovation and creative approaches for appealing to human reason and compassion can bring about a healthier world for people, animals, and the environment. Thank you so much for coming, Leslie.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, let's bring up Melissa White as well. Melissa White is Animal Places Food for Thought Program Manager. She's been an animal activist since she was a child and has organized protests, given presentations on veganism at schools, assisted in running a vegan mentor program, created animal-friendly content for social media, inspired and supported new activists, and so much more. In her free time, she enjoys voice acting, watching anime, playing video games, baking, running, and spending time with her 2 rescue cats, Kit and Luna. So welcome so much, Melissa. Glad to have you both here.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So we're going to start with just a basic overview. So each of you can take about 5 minutes. Has anybody seen Dawn, by the way? Dawn, if you're here, let us know in the chat. Okay, so since Dawn isn't here, we can be a little bit more relaxed with our pace. So go ahead and take about 5 or 6 minutes, each of you, to share a little about your organization, the types of projects you support, and the available funding. So go ahead, please, Leslie, if you could start us off.
Okay, thanks, Beth. Thanks so much. I think I recognize some names on here, so that's very exciting. Can I have a quick thumbs up if you've been a VegFund grantee and know anything about us at all? Yay! All right. Well, thank you. Several of you then know what we do at VegFund. We were a project started in 2009 for the purpose of funding vegan activism globally. And so we are truly global at this point. From year to year, we seem to reach out to folks anywhere from 50, 60, 70 countries. And while we predominantly fund activists in the US, the UK, Australia, and Canada, I think that's really just suggestive of the, where veganism has kind of really taken off and where activism is the most present. So some of you who may have accessed funding from VegFund know that we have historically funded a lot in just kind of the grassroots community event space. So you may have applied for a grant for us to do food sampling. That was really at the core of how VegFund began, with our first grant being back in 2009 for a food sampling grant in Cleveland, Ohio, to which I'm very proud because I'm originally a Buckeye. So it's like, wow, that's weird. We also fund documentary screening, so paying the licensing fee where that's relevant. That's something that's kind of changed over time as more of the films have gone to streaming platforms, but historically we've paid the licensing fees for some of those films that maybe are not yet streaming, as well as the venue. A lot of activists will combine food sampling with film screening, so that's an area in which we're very active. An event that's really near and dear to our heart are the Veg Fests. So many of you may be organizers of Veg Fest, or you might, be part of the organizing team or a volunteer. We love Veg Fest because, as you all, I'm sure, have attended a Veg Fest, there's such positive, upbeat events, and they're very welcoming to people of all ages. And it's a way to receive information in usually a very cheerful space. So we fund a lot of Veg Fests, and we've tried to do some work with organizers, particularly in the last 5 or 6 years, I guess, just to kind of understand what organizers need and what it takes to keep those Veg Fests going. Because I know they're a heavy lift, they're a heavy activism lift, but it's an area that we love. We also fund a lot of paid to view. So you may or may not be familiar with, for example, some of the videos that Animal Equality put together that demonstrates, quite frankly, the hard facts and truth of what it's like to be an animal caught up in the human food chain and the factory farm setting. So we'll fund a lot of paid to view, where people are looking through virtual reality goggles at some of that footage that's coming out of, kind of, I guess you would say, manufacturing, factory farms, and or the slaughter plant. So kind of a harder look at activism. Historically too, we've had a lot of funding go to an area called innovative outreach that over time became known as special projects. And those special projects encompass, oh gosh, everything that you can imagine. It might be trying to get more plant-based menu items on into, school canteens, school cafeterias, or universities. It might be vegan challenges. It could be, historically, we kind of funded a lot of billboards or new video content, just everything from soup to nuts that you can think of that really doesn't fit into the community events. And we had also historically, but now we're getting away from funding a lot of online campaigns. So a lot of social media campaigns. So, Facebook, Instagram, what have you. However, we are, which I could explain in a minute, we're kind of getting away from funding those kinds of campaigns. And we're really coming back to what was the core and essence of VegFund, which are the community events. So again, that's the food sampling, the Veg Fests, the paid to view, and the documentary screening. So that's kind of at the heart of what we're most interested in at this time. So, gosh, over time, I mean, literally, we have funded probably easily 10,000 events around the world since 2009, put out a bunch of food samples. I think it's over 1 million food samples at this point. And, you know, we try to fund things in which activists can reach out to the community with literally and figuratively kind of small bites of information, or, you know, kind of small bites of an experience, because we know as we, you know, we speak to the public, many people who consider plant-based diets and vegan living, for many, it seems to be a journey. So we're not trying to necessarily overwhelm people with all the answers at once, but to deliver bite-sized pieces of information, whether that be in a food sample or literally in a, you know, the information that would come from a documentary screening. So, you know, typically then our grants can range anywhere from, I mean, we've had grants as small as $10. We've always held near and dear to our heart that whomever wants to go out into society and advocate for vegan living, that, you know, we would fund the smallest grant. And on average, though, the grant size is probably closer to $500, maybe $1,500 to $2,000 for a veg fest. So across these community events, they vary some, but they're small grants. Activists can apply really as many times as they want in a particular year. The only requirement being that before we move on to the next grant, we want to have closed the grant that's in play. So, you know, we ask for a grant report because we have predominantly worked on a reimbursement model, meaning that the activist is actually funding their activity up front. We will give you a grant commitment to say, yes, if you do that activity, we will fund the grant up to X number of dollars. And then to get the reimbursement for the amount that we've previously committed to, you'll submit a report and then we will fund you. So typically that works pretty well. I know that can, you know, cause some hardship, quite honestly, for activists who have to fund their events up front. We also had an experience, unfortunately, that when we tried to fund them up front and didn't ask for the reports, not so many people reported. So we reverted back to the model, the reimbursement model, where you fund the event up front typically, and then based on the commitment that we've given you, and then you come back to us after your event, file a report, and we give you the reimbursement. I can go on, or whatever you'd like me to do. Maybe that's enough to digest for now. Hey, Beth, you might be.
That's great. That's great for an introduction. Thank you so much, Leslie.
Okay.
So let's go ahead over to Melissa, and please share a little bit about your organization and what kinds of things you support.
Yeah, absolutely. So Food for Thought is a program of Animal Place. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Animal Place first. So Animal Place is one of the oldest and largest sanctuaries in the US, with a specific focus on farmed animals like cows, pigs, chickens. And our founder, Kim Sterla, comes from an animal shelter background. She used to work at her local humane society, and she very quickly saw that there was a disconnect in the way that her colleagues looked at animals like cats and dogs versus how they looked at farmed animals. So that became very apparent to her. And it was especially apparent when they took in a stray little piglet named Zelda one day, and their mission was to find her a home. And everybody, all her colleagues, everyone who worked at the shelter just absolutely loved this little piglet. They doted on her. They shared their lunches with her. So everyone just really loved having her around. But unfortunately, there was a fundraising event at the Humane Society one day, and there was ham served at the event. So all these people who had loved this little piglet were eating, potentially, it could have been her or her brothers and sisters, and nobody really made that connection. So that was a little jarring to Kim to see that happen. So that same year, she founded Animal Place in 1989. And Zelda was the very first official resident of Animal Place. So she got her happy ending, which is amazing. But when Kim was founding Animal Place, something that was always really important to her was balancing our sanctuary work with our education. So it's important to have education, because how are people going to know why we should love and care about farmed animals the same way we do with cats and dogs if there's no education on the matter. So that's something that's always been super critical to Animal Place. And thus, the Food for Thought program, which is a program that is very much based around education and the idea that all animals deserve to be loved equally, that program was born based on Kim's experience at her local humane society. So our mission here at Food for Thought is to encourage and inspire nonprofit organizations like animal shelters to extend their compassion to all animals by adopting ideally a vegan menu policy, but we also are willing to meet people halfway if a vegetarian menu policy might be more feasible for them right now. So it's like a stepping stone, but we have the option just to have that halfway point for them. It's definitely a really unique program. It's something that I've never seen before. I don't think there's anything quite like it out there, but it's very slow moving because it's public policy work. So we're encouraging people to go to their board of directors and encourage these menu policies. And with any policy work, there are always going to be people who are not on board with what you're trying to do. So it's something that's slow going. It's something that it's planting those little seeds over and over again and hoping that one of them sprouts. And they definitely have, because we've worked with about 600 nonprofit organizations with adopting a policy. So that's about how many organizations we've worked with so far that have actually been successful in doing this. We're still definitely working on it, but it's something that it takes time. And my team spends a lot of time outreaching. So we reach out to a lot of nonprofit organizations, mainly animal shelters, and encourage them to adopt these policies. But we have the mindset while we're doing this that it is extremely difficult to be a shelter worker. You know, these people are dealing with the animals that we're supposed to love, cats and dogs, like as a society. They're dealing with them being discarded for one reason or another, just thrown away. So that is devastating. It's exhausting. So we make this as easy as possible for them because we don't want to add more to their plate than they already have, because they're worked so hard already. So we have sample policies on our website that people can use. They don't have to write up their own menu policy if they don't want to. We have menu policy presentations that people can just bring directly to their board of directors and present it. They don't have to come up with a presentation or anything. And we also have a list of reasons why it's important to adopt a menu policy so that they don't have to do research or anything like that. Just letting them know that we're all in this together and we're on the same team, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to save as many animals as possible. And we all are so compassionate and care so much. So we never want anybody to feel like we're criticizing them or telling them that they're not doing enough. We just want them to know that we're here to help, which leads me to our grant opportunities. So we have 2 grants available. I'm going to actually post the link in the chat so that you can all look at the qualifications, just to be mindful of time. But I want to briefly say what each grant is. So we have our policy grant, which is a one-time gift for organizations who have recently adopted a vegan or vegetarian menu policy. So for the organizations who have adopted a vegan menu policy, we give them $1,000. And for the organizations that have adopted a vegetarian menu policy, we give them $250. For our next grant is our vegan event grant, which is up to $1,000 reimbursement for food costs for an organization's first fully vegan event. So this one is really great because it's good for organizations that they're interested in adopting a policy, but maybe they're unsure, because this gives them a chance to see how their supporters will react. It gives them a chance to see how their board will react. And then after the event, they can vote on whether or not they want to adopt a policy. So those are our grants in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead. I still don't see Dawn Moncrief from A Well-Fed World here. So I'm going to, while the next question is being answered, I'll just write a little bit about Dawn in the chat and put the link to the website just to let folks know so that you can check out her organization as well. So we're going to move to the second question, which is about, basically how do people apply for these funds? So what's the application process? And especially, thank you, Melissa, you modeled putting the link in the chat. That's great. Both of your organizations have very extensive information about applying on the website. But if you can also really focus on how can somebody create an application that's going to stand out, and not just for your organization, but just in general as funders who look at applications, how can people make their proposals for funding stand out? And what are any additional tips you can give them for funding their programs? And let's see, we're a little behind. Let's go for about 5 minutes each, so we leave plenty of time for questions and answers. Let's see, Melissa, you want to start this one off?
Yeah, sure. Did you want me to go through the application process, or would you rather have me just talk about how to make it stand out? I know you said we're short on time, so.
Not terribly short on time. If you want to say a little bit about the application process and then mostly concentrate on tips and making their application stand out, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I can totally do that. So the application process is going to vary depending on which grant you apply for. So for the policy grant, you have to adopt your policy first. And for the vegan event grant, you have to plan your vegan event first. So for, I guess I'll just go quickly through this, but all of this is on our website in case anybody wants to look. I'll go through this very briefly with you. So for the menu policy, read over the grant criteria always, and then apply. You're going to be emailing our main email address, which is foodforthought@animalplace.org. I'll also post that in the chat in case any of you want to contact us, just so you have it. It's also on our website. But you're going to email us proof that your organization adopted a written board-approved policy. So you can send us your board meeting minutes, your policy language written on your organization's letterhead and signed by your executive director or board. My team sends out these Dropbox sign documents that have your policy language on them, and all you have to do is sign it. So that's really easy. You can definitely send that to us. And it could also be a policy statement on your website. So there are a plethora of things that you could share. Then I'll contact you to schedule a phone call. This is just kind of to make sure that we didn't miss any details in the application and make sure that you gave us everything that you have and everything that we need. Then we'll review your application and I'll contact you with a decision in a week or less, usually less. So if approved, your organization will be mailed a check from Animal Place. And if not, we still are very supportive of organizations who have adopted a policy. So we add your organization with your permission to our website and social media as a policy leader, basically just meaning organization that has adopted a menu policy. For the vegan event grant, like I said, plan the details, make sure you have as many details as possible, because that makes it stand out to us. What kind of food, how many people are showing up, location, every little detail. If you can have that in your application, we're going to be like, okay, these people are prepared and they have done the planning already, which is so helpful. So then you'll apply for the vegan event grant. I just want to note that if you do apply for this one, it has to be a minimum of 6 weeks prior to your event, because we send out materials for you to promote food for thought at your event. And we want to make sure that you get those materials in time. So same type of deal. I schedule a phone call. We talk, make sure we got everything. We review the application. I contact you within a week. And to learn what happens after the approval, that's all on our website. I'm not going to go into that, but if you want to learn about what goes through or what happens after that, I would recommend looking at that grant page that I sent. So to make your proposal stand out, like I just was saying, be as detailed as possible on either one, because the more details that we have, the easier and the more smoothly that the process is going to go, so that there's no back and forth, me asking you questions about whatever we missed. So just make sure you have as much information on there as possible. That shows us you read the instructions and followed them too, which is really helpful to have. And honestly, my main thing I would say is what makes your application stand out is passion. We want to see that you're serious about veganism and adopting a policy, because I think with any grant, there's always people who are going to be like, oh, $1,000 sounds great, right? Like, how can I get that? But for this, we want you to be serious about it. We want you to care. And so if you can show us that you're passionate about the cause, that stands out to us too. As far as any tips, I just wanted to get into, I'm sure not everyone in here is representing an organization. So I wanted to give a little activism tip because I feel like that would be super helpful if you're in here and just you're an individual. So we have something on our website, which I linked in the chat. I'm spamming links, I apologize, but just giving you as much information as possible here. We have something called our report card where we have all of the organizations that we've been in touch with listed whether or not they have a menu policy or they don't. So if you look up your local animal shelter, for example, and you see that they don't have a menu policy, it would be so helpful if you could email them and just send them a polite message encouraging them. Our catchphrases align your menu with your mission, so feel free to use that, but just, make sure, we're saving animals, but we want to save all animals. So just sending them an email, because they care a lot more about hearing from their community than they do from us. Like, we're cool, right? But they care mostly about the people that are around them and the people that can attend their events. They want to know what you think. So if you can do that kind of activism and look on our website and find your local animal shelter, that would be really helpful. But otherwise, I think just detail, and passion are really important when it comes to applying for the grants. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. How about you, Leslie?
Yeah, so if you go to VegFund's website at vegfund.org, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner of the website, there's a button there that says apply, and that will take you to the grant portal. So at this time, the only portal we have open are for those community events. So we're actually not funding things outside of the community events. And just one more time, a quick reminder. So that would be the food sampling, the documentary screenings, the Veg Fest, and the Paid to View. Those are effectively the core events that we're funding at this moment. And you'll click on the community events portal then, and when you go to that portal, you'll see a fairly detailed application that you would complete. So everything that we're interested in is in that application. There'll be an applicant profile that will collect some information on you that you're, whatever you're willing to share with us is always helpful. Some demographic information, and of course your address and all those kinds of things. So it's pretty self-explanatory. And then when you get to the grant application itself, again, the information that we're really hoping to collect is all there. And I would say where we often have some shortcomings are people kind of really aren't very clear sometimes on how they're going to use the budget. So if you'd be mindful of, completing in greater detail that budget section, we would appreciate that. For what it's worth, we historically, we have not had a practice of funding like personal time for the activism that you're doing. We're covering the expenses of your activism, but not your personal time in terms of, a salary or what have you. So it really is, from our point of view, a volunteer activity that we're most interested in funding, but the expenses related to that. So again, for example, if you want food sampling, then we would help you cover the cost of the food samples and potentially some literature, or other expenses that you say are relevant, maybe part of the venue or something like that. So, but you'll see in the application the kind of information that we're most interested in. We've historically had a pretty high approval rate for grants in the community events area. And so honestly, anyone who's providing, coherent information per the application that is there, you stand a reasonably good chance of being funded, quite honestly. I said previously, we've not been judgmental, if you will, if if they say, hey, I need $10, we will consider that grant. If nothing else, where we are right now, we've actually had a pretty dramatic reduction in our funding. So that's something that we're grappling with right now. If nothing else, our grants are probably going to be smaller rather than larger, as a matter of fact. So, and when I say larger, at this point, 1,500 would be a pretty large grant for us at this time. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I want to say one thing that is particularly of interest to VegFund is anything that you can do to evaluate your event is really, really interesting to us. And we've got some resources on our website to help you think about evaluation. But let me just say, if you think about evaluation in many respects starts before you do the event. And then after the event, you're evaluating what happened against what you thought would happen. So evaluation is always, always interesting because, as we know, there's only so much funding to go around. And a lot of the people who would prospectively fund VegFund or your projects, they want to know that they're funding quality projects. So the more that you can do in evaluation within reason, probably the better off you will be. We don't require necessarily that you evaluate your event, but we think it's good practice. And it's something you should really be thinking about to, enhance your activism, because you always want to be making tweaks and changes to what you're doing so that, you're the most effective that you can be, particularly in a landscape where there's not a lot of funding available. So you want to be competitive in every respect possible. So I don't know, I think it's pretty straightforward, our application. Some people moan that it's kind of lengthy, but we promise you that all the information that we collect is very helpful in our driving a decision. So if you go there and you have any questions, you could always email me. I'll put my email in the chat. I don't know, are there any questions about how we look at applications? As I think I said before, we need at least 4 weeks before your event. And that's a pretty hard and fast deadline because that's almost the minimum. I know Melissa said they need 6, and I get that. That resonates with me. But so far we've been approving events where you're just 4 weeks out, but we will often just flat out deny somebody who submits something that's not within 4 weeks because there's lots of competition for the funds and we need that time as well. So we really need 4 weeks to look at what you have going on and to approve your application.
Thank you so much, Leslie. And I'll just let folks know that we will have time for Q&A at the end, and there haven't been that many questions yet. But Dawn, I'm so delighted you got here. I did a partial introduction to you earlier and put your bio in the chat. So to save time, I'm just going to go ahead and ask you to, in about 5 minutes, collapse the kind of 2 main topics. Tell us about your organization and what kinds of things you fund, and then a little bit about the application process, and especially how people can make sure that their application stands out and potentially gets funded.
Thank you, Beth, and extreme apologies to everybody for being late. I'm so sorry, and happy to be here, especially for such an important topic. So I am Dawn with A Well-Fed World, and as an organization beyond the grants, we focus on the food security benefits of plant-based diets, and also with that climate change, of course, because climate is a hunger multiplier, and then just for climate reasons in particular. So very much appreciate what you all are up to, and especially happy to be here. For grants, we have a model similar to VegFund. 1,000 is our basic grant, but we do go more than that. We go 500 if it's an individual in the US for tax reasons. Once you hit a 600 level, then we have to do a 1099 tax form. So everybody should be claiming taxes regardless of whether we submit a tax form, but for individuals, we would do an extra care if somebody wanted more than $500. If you are a group in the US and you have more than one person, then you could have 2 people from your group apply, or even 3 people, and get $500 each. And then as a group itself, then easily 1,000, that's kind of our baseline, but more is available. And more is also available if we have an existing relationship with you. That will help because we are able to see, the good work going over again, or if we already know you through events or familiar with the organization, etc. We don't have a hard deadline in terms of the 4 weeks, but that definitely is ideal to get it in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, months ahead of time, because then you can also just use those funds to get more out of them. Early money is stronger money a lot of times, but what we do is we'll just say, you can apply it to the organization. So if something does come in late, sometimes there's a good promotion or something that it will help bolster, or they could apply it to the organization more generally, which is also what we've done occasionally if events had to be canceled, especially during COVID. So we try to have a lot of flexibility. Like Leslie was saying, quantification and evaluation is great, it's ideal, but we also use a trust-based model. Not that the other models aren't trust-based, but if we know the people and the work is good, that is more what we're looking for. And we can tell a lot online. So I know I'm kind of not being very linear about this, but we do a lot of evaluation on social media. Some people will say like, oh, that's my personal page. There's no such thing. So we do heavy online research in terms of the people individually and the group and what's being said, and we will deny grants on that basis if they don't match our criteria in terms of any kind of animal exploitation or based on other types of comments that don't support LGBTQ rights or women or anything of that nature. If there's some hardline conspiracies, anything that makes us feel uncomfortable, we have a lot of discretion in that. And so some people applaud that and other people don't like it, but that is what you need to know in terms of our methods. We do have an online grant application. It is very short and easy. So yeah, it's the basics. The main thing I guess is we need a W-8 or a W-9. But we have that information also spelled out. It's included in the application, so you can just click it and you can download it and upload it in the application. Or if that's confusing for some folks, we can also take information by email. I know some folks are not as, it doesn't really require much tech savviness, but it does some. So people are not maybe used to using download functions, and we do try to have that online as easily available. On our website, which is awfw.org for A Well-Fed World. You can also use plantsforhunger.org with the number 4 or spelled out. And that it all goes to the same website. We're just trying to use actually Plants for Hunger. We think maybe people will remember it more and it's more obvious that we are supporting food programs. But what I'm speaking about now is mostly advocacy. But anyway, it'll say grants, you go to the page, it's got a big line for application. There's also information you can see in terms of what will be on the application ahead of time. But it should be pretty easy. I feel like groups, you're already out there doing so much work and you have to do the admin, you got to do the fundraising, you got to do the actual event. And so we want to make that as easy as possible. And I will stop. Advocacy is great. Like the Sweet Spot Veg Fests are great. Any kind of diet change, plant-based diet encouragement is great. We also do feeding programs, but we have to fundraise for that separately. So we actually don't quite have as much discretion and we don't have quite as much money for that as we do for the advocacy grants, but we do fundraise for it. So it ebbs and flows, and also our ability to fund expands and contracts depending on the type of money that we've been able to bring in.
Thank you so much, Dawn. So I just want to briefly say before we have questions that I found out about the Animal Place grant after Eat for the Earth had already done many vegan meals. So we had a vegan policy, so we didn't qualify. But Eat for the Earth has gotten grants from both VegFund and A Well-Fed World. And I just want to endorse that these are great organizations to apply to because they do make it easy and they do want to support vegans. That is their mission. And I also want to encourage people, don't, look for those easier grants, those ones where, the people giving the funding already understand why you're doing what you're doing and want you to do it and want to support you. But it's really incumbent on us to also make inroads with other funders so they start to understand, that our cause is touching on health issues, it's touching on the environment, it's touching on human spiritual integrity, on animal well-being, et cetera. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the questions. And it looks like we have about 8 minutes because we're also going to have a little bit of closing stuff, 8 or 10 minutes. So I would like to bring some of these people who are who have questions up, but it's a little risky. So I need your support in keeping your questions concise and not, if you have something to tell people, put it in the chat. But if you have a real question for these funders, I'm going to bring you up. So I think I want to start with whose question was first? It was Sarah. Sarah, you had a question. Sarah Siegel. What was you had several questions, but you had a question early on. So Sarah, come on up. Sarah Siegel, where was her first question? Oh, free vegan food samples, working with organizations that give people food. I don't see Sarah yet. Okay.
Yes, I think Sarah doesn't have a camera on.
Oh, she doesn't have a camera. Okay, Sarah, are you, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I actually typed in my questions into the chat.
Right, you want me to ask them then?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Sarah's wondering if any of you send free vegan food samples to shelters, or I guess that's for Melissa.
Forgive me because I've been in this position for 2 months at this point, so I haven't done this myself, like send it to the shelters. But as far as I know, we have some organizations that have given us food samples. Like I know there was one for like free vegan cheese that we got a bunch of them and we sent them out to some shelters to try. But mostly we have discounts available to shelters to entice them to try things, because we have reached out to so many organizations just asking if they have any discounts available. So we keep track of those codes, and there are specific codes for food for thought in particular. So that's typically what we send, as far as I know. I'm sorry, I don't have a more concise response to that question for you, but that's a good idea.
Thanks. And Sarah, was your other question about the Make-A-Wish Foundation, was that for the funders, or was that for people in the
The
chat?
ones that we're trying to get them to have a vegan menu. So like I know
Okay.
Make-A-Wish, they send kids to swim with dolphins. And I was just thinking that would be great if you guys could they're headquartered in Arizona. You could get I'm sure somebody's reached out, but I was just thinking that would be a great organization to reach out, because it's all about kids and their health that should be first, I think. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. We typically only reach out to organizations that work directly with animals. So like animal shelters. Sometimes we'll reach out to environmental or wildlife organizations. We haven't worked our way to like nonprofit charities yet, but that's a great idea. We'll definitely keep that in mind.
Thank you. Thank you. So BJ, you had a question for Dawn that had to do with vegan food in Ethiopia. And I have a kind of a broader thing I'd like to ask all of the panelists to answer, which is, are your grants available outside of the US? But maybe Dawn, you could start.
In Ethiopia in particular, we partner with the International Fund for Africa, who I have known personally for more than a decade. And I've been to Ethiopia 3 times to see it and to work with them one-on-one. It's an amazing program. I don't know if there's any questions, but we are a partner. We have a partner level status with them, so we give them much more than the standard $1,000. And we do international grants, yeah, absolutely, to individuals and organizations. There is not the $500 limit for individuals as there is in the US, because it's going to be tax exempt. And yeah, so that will be a W-8 form, which we have instructions. I don't mean to make that complicated. It's in the application if there's questions, but we also have printed out instructions with it to make that easier, telling you ignore this number, ignore that number. With this number, that's, you know, choose between these two, and things of that nature. They're actually quite simple. It sounds like a lot, but it's mostly just to get your name and organization, address, and details.
Great, thank you.
Also, and with international ones, we have to run sanctions checks. So they're a little more annoying. You have to send us the name of your top leadership and their citizens, country of citizenship and country of residence. Oftentimes it's the same. It doesn't take a lot, but that can be kind of annoying.
Thank you. Yeah. Leslie, Melissa, do either of you fund international grants?
We do. Yes, we have. Yes. And honestly, the application process is really not any different than for a US based grant. The only thing is that Dawn just referenced, we have to run an OFAC check, which is the sanctions check, to make sure that the grantee is, you know, not on some kind of an unfortunate terrorist list or something that would have been targeted by, say, like the Treasury Department of the US or the State Department. So we do run that check, but we do fund lots of international grants.
Yeah, same here. It's the same process, like Leslie said, it's the same, you would go through the same steps. And we also have background checks, so to speak. So same type of thing. So yeah, definitely we fund a lot of international grants.
That's great. Yeah, because I know there's especially in Africa, there's quite a growing vegan movement, and there's not often a lot of resources there. So it just warms my heart that all of you are doing international grants.
Yeah, so if anybody who's dealing in Africa, there's also Thrive Philanthropy has just started with Jessica Ava, and she specializes in Africa.
Can you put that in the chat, Dawn?
Yeah, I mean,
That'd be great. Thank you. And Ray has a question about a Bible for proposal writing, or any you know, work that you can reference that supports people in writing proposals.
I can't think of a Bible per se, but that I can tell you that VegFund of also pursuing grants too for its own funding. I think the clearer you can be about what you think your outcomes are going to be and potentially the impact. Sometimes I think the word impact is overused at some level, because in the work that we can do, we can't necessarily fully understand the impact, but we can understand the outcomes sometimes of what we're doing. So I think, as I said a few minutes ago, the more you think in advance about what you're trying to achieve at the end, I think that is often more compelling to a lot of funders. And these are for the kinds of proposals that maybe you're writing, you know, blue sky, where there's not really a template or an application. So my comment is in the context of if you're just sending in a proposal to a funder for, you know, I don't know, $25,000 or something, as opposed to the more defined community events proposal or application that we would have. So, you know, I think it's just really, really important to be able to demonstrate what is the value added of the project that you're proposing, or what's the value added of your organization. Why is that funding needed? You know, why is it necessary? And what are the outcomes that it seeks to achieve? And then again, to have like clarity around your budget, how you're going to send that budget. And also another thing I think is really important is, what capacity do you as an individual or does your organization deliver to really be able to implement that project? You know, is it, you might have a lot of passion for what you're proposing, but do you really have the internal capacity, the know-how, the knowledge, the skills to be able to create and implement the project? And I think that's really, really important to any serious funder.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah. I want to add that I just had the idea that one of the upcoming VCOPs we could do, we can invite some people who teach grant writing to come and talk to us. I think that would be very valuable.
I'll go ahead and add, if you, Leslie, what you were saying reminds me of it in terms of having a particular niche. So that's just saying what Leslie said, but in a different way. So if you have a particular niche to say so, and we are all pretty aligned at this group, but just in general, be really clear about that particular grant that you're proposing. Know what that organization and foundation, what they want, speak in their language, and it should be tailored in the same way. I would advise anyone to tailor a resume and a cover letter when you're applying for an organization. If you just send out something generic that you send to everybody, it's probably not going to do as well. Now, we might be an exception to that because your information probably is something that you can just send to us if it's already aligned. But if you're looking for grants outside of us in particular, then really understand your organization that you're applying to. Use the same language.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a couple more questions coming in the chat, but I wanna give each of our participants a chance to say whatever they didn't get to say yet, and then I'll wrap up with and we just have a few minutes left. So so I think that if people want to continue the conversation in the chat, that's been happening with some of these sessions, that would be great. And if all three of our funders, when we're done, would take a look at the chat and answer questions that you think you have an answer for that haven't been answered fully, that would be great.
Reverend Beth, Allison has her hand up.
Oh, Allison has her hand up. Okay, let's take one more then.
Hi, I'm Allison, and I'm in Lima, Peru. And in November, when Dr. Rao announced World Food Healers Day, we organized to serve meals in 6 different locations. And so we're addressing food security with a local NGO called Ollas Comunes Veganas. And I would like to contact all 3 of you, but I particularly wanted Dawn to associate my name with my face because we continue to move forward. We've been getting ourselves legally established and making progress. We have over 100 volunteers. And so we were recently approved for a $1,000 grant through a Well-Fed World, and we're really looking forward to working with them. Yeah, so.
Great job, Allison. For anybody listening, that does matter. I mean, in terms of, oh, I went on to see me and have a face associated. So you might want to think that it shouldn't, but people are people. And especially a relationship type organization, that it does help being able to see folks. So well done for everybody being here.
Right, wonderful. So that leads me to the idea that we could just, I do still want to give everybody time for a short closing remark, but if you have been funded by any of the 3 of these organizations and you would like a moment just to say your name and the name of your organization, raise your hand. And somebody help me look for okay, there's Ray. Ray raised his hand. So let's just let Ray say the name of his organization. Choose. Okay, he's got a Well-Fed World on his book. He's got the logo. That's great. Okay.
This poster made my family go vegan. So I just wanted to testify that these projects have an impact.
I watched your poster, Ray. My family's not come along yet. Who else? Anybody else? Sarah's got her hand up. She's been funded and she already came on and said her name. So there's Sarah Siegel. Who else? Anybody else? Any other hands? Okay. All righty. Okay. So let's see. Leslie, you want to go first with just like a 1-minute closing comment?
Sure. Just, I guess I would just say, keep it up, right? Because I'm so impressed what the activist community is out there doing. We've looked at thousands of applications and really, it warms my heart, the commitment that people have to moving forward, kind of the vegan agenda. It's just amazing, the advocacy work that's going on across the world. And, if you're applying to VegFund and you find that the application is too onerous, or the process is onerous, we do have a space for you to tell us that. So we also want to learn from you about your experience with VegFund and, offer apologies in advance that we can't fund everything. And as I explained, we increasingly can't fund everything. And so we've sort of retrenched to really our community event grants, owing to funding constraints now. But we'd be happy again to try to look at the food sampling, the veg fests, the screenings, or the paid to view. And please feel free to reach out to me at Leslie, LESLAE at vegfund.org, which I can put in the chat. But again, keep up the good work, and thank you for your inspiration, because I've always said we wouldn't exist without you. So we really appreciate all the work you're doing.
Thanks, Leslie. Melissa?
Yeah, I definitely echo the keep up the good work sentiment. I think especially people who work with us at Food for Thought, I mean, they're going against a lot of naysayers at the shelter. A lot of times it's, a lot of times it's a vegan who's trying to get this vegan menu policy in place. And I just want to say that's incredible. I know it's really hard. Vegans, unfortunately, are not the majority yet. So it's really difficult to try to get people on the same page as you. But if you're one of those people and you're struggling to get one of these menu policies, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to go through this information with you and give you any tips to maybe move the process along further. And of course, we have our grants available, but my email is melissa@animalplace.org. I'm always happy. And if you think of any other questions that you didn't think of during this panel, please feel free to email me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And thank you for your time, and thank you for all the work that all of you do. You are all really inspirational.
Thank you, Melissa. Dawn?
Okay, well, I know asking for the money is the worst. We also have to ask for money. One of the things that we're able to do though is say, oh, we give the money to other groups and we're great because they're great. And so that makes it easier for us to ask money. But do know if your event falls in that sweet spot for us, we love it. We're like, you're doing the work. We're so happy to give it out now. And we do give out money that is not in the sweet spot. So sometimes we're like a little bit, but we will, if we can, go ahead and at least send something. So it's worth a try. In terms of the sanctuaries, I wish I had better news to report about sanctuaries. It's really hard. There is a micro sanctuary resource center that gives out some small grants also. I saw in the question comments section that about for animals in the sanctuaries who need food because there's not enough food. And I'll just say that is really uncomfortable. If it's something like there's a one-time something happened, but if you are struggling to feed your animals, that's, there's a problem in general, that you're out of balance, and that is hard for us as funders to just give a band-aid for food because the model itself is not working if there's a consistent need for food. And again, I hate to say that I want to feed everybody. And if it's something happened, it's one thing, but if it's ongoing, then that's a real problem.
Thank you, Dawn. Thank you, everybody. So we're at the end of our time, and I want to say one last thing about where to find out more funding sources. VegFund has an excellent list on their website of other places that fund vegan projects. And again, don't forget to look beyond the vegan funders, the plant-based funders, because there are others who will fund our work. So I'd like to ask everybody to give me a thumbs up if you feel inspired and on fire. Give me a thumbs up, and give me 2 thumbs up if you're ready to go out there and get some work done and get some funds to get your work done. So give me 2 thumbs up. All righty, thank you all. I'll turn it back over.